So I would like to take up now all the abstract concepts that have been introduced before, and I would like to invite you to have a look at the streets and at the current user groups and patterns of street use. Next slide, please. Of course, my presentation is also based on the abstract concepts that we have heard about before. So let's have a look at this street as an example. And then let's look who are the movement users, the place users, as Peter Jones has introduced the system that we. So could we go one step back, please, and look at the street as it is, as a plain street. So you see a street, it's located in Lisbon, I can say it in the very beginning. And you see the buildings, nice buildings, really nice buildings. There are balconies, there's lighting, there are shops, there are hundreds of persons living in these buildings. And then you see the street and the street users. And now we can go to the next slide and have a look at the street users. So let's start with the movement function that has been introduced before. So streets as conduits. Streets are there for moving people and goods safely, comfortably. And this sounds really simple, or as a one-dimensional target function. But when we look at the list of the different movement users that we have in urban streets, then we get an impression on how complex already this function is. So we have the pedestrians, and we can look here for pedestrians. So I tried to highlight the pedestrians that we have. We have the cyclists as movement users. So these are all these blue circles. We have the micro vehicles, the scooters, public transport, buses, trams. There's no tram in the street. Taxis, motorcycles, light vans, and heavy goods. Vehicles, we have all the persons and goods, the vehicles moving along the street, and we have also some street users crossing the street. So these are also movement functions. So we have here one pedestrian in the middle of the street. I don't know whether you can see it, crossing the street, also an important movement function. And then the second dimension is the place functions. So we have streets as destinations. Streets are not only conduits for moving people and goods, but they are also destinations on their own. And let's have a look at the place functions here. So first of all, there are the activities, waiting, eating, watching, relaxing, chatting, working in the public space on the sidewalks. Then we need to provide access to the buildings next to the street. We need to provide for parking, for stopping. So you see this here on the left-hand side, some parking lots, and services to be delivered to the buildings. These are the different functions in our streets along the classification of movement and place. And it's easy to see that it's hardly possible to accommodate all these different user needs and street usages comprehensively. You always need to set priorities. And the next slide now shows on how do we measure progress towards the different objectives. And we can just show the three pillars at once to save some time. So we have, again, the blue one, the movement function, the red one, this is the place function and not the movement function. And then we have the green one. These are the wider impacts. For the movement function, the target is quite simple. Moving vehicles, pedestrians, goods, persons safely and comfortably. And for the for the place function, the target is really contrary. So we want to see many people staying in the street for long periods of time and doing quite ambitious place activities, such as talking to each other, which is only possible when the noise is low enough. So the indicators that we identified and more include for the movement function indicators on the quality of movement and then on the poor volume. So we also make progress when we just succeed in increasing the number of cyclists or pedestrians, for example, in our streets. And then for the place function, we have identified the indicators, just again, the volumes and then the duration of stationary activities. So you see how different the target functions are. So in the place function, in the red pillar, we want to see the people stay for a long time. In the blue pillar, we talk about travel times, low travel times, high speeds, low delays, high reliability. And then we have, of course, the wider impact. So we have heard about the carbon footprint already. We need to look at traffic accidents, safety, when we have particularly more vulnerable road users, and noise, air quality, carbon emissions, on-street crime, and public health. Next slide. When we look at the space efficiency of our different street user groups, then we can see quite substantial differences. So we see here the capacity of a single 10-foot line. This is about 3 meters for the different types of street users. So when you think 1 hour has 3,600 seconds, so every second, there comes a car, then you would have a capacity of 1,800 vehicles, cars per hour. This is the first line here. And the range is 600 to 1,600 vehicles, cars per hour here, because we have also the traffic lights. So you will not succeed in any urban street to have every second car. And then you see how far more persons we can move with the same space for the other types of vehicles. Next slide, please. So now these are our 5 stress sections that we worked on in more. So we have in each of the partner cities, we had one corridor. Peter Jones introduced them already. And you see here the maps on the left-hand side. So all these 5 stress sections are main streets. So you have high movement and high place functions, both. So these are the most ambitious and challenging design tasks that we have in the cities. But besides this, of course, there are many differences also between these streets. So this is Budapest, really close to the city center, very nice street. You see the nice buildings, also high traffic loads. Then we go to Constanta. So they have worked on a roundabout. So when we move to the next slide, then we see the picture for Constanta. This was a roundabout, and it is not so obvious from this picture, but you also have here really intense place activities. Then for Lisbon, you know this picture already. In London, the street section is the next one. So you see here again the different place and street and movement user groups. And then the last one is Malmö. And in Malmö, we had a special situation that the Malmö team worked for the design packages for a street that is not yet there. So they had to work for their analysis of the current situation with other streets. So they chose 5 so-called reference streets, and you see one of them here on this picture. So for each of these streets, we did some analysis, and 2 examples are shown on the next slides. And then, of course, the more teams in the cities, they were really actively engaged in developing design packages to change the design for these different streets. So let's have a look at this first example of current street user groups and usages with the help of this figure here for London. So you see in red the pedestrians. So people let's stay on a qualitative level for explanation. But the thicker the lines, the more users you have for each specific user group. So in red, you see the pedestrians, and you see that the pedestrians really vary in their number, quite on short parts of the sections. These are, for instance, public transport stops. Yeah, then you have there really higher number of pedestrians and place users. These are the red ones. In green, you have the cyclists. Always people moved are shown on this graph. In blue, you have the people moved by buses. And in gray, you have the people moved by car, by motorized vehicles, individual motorized vehicles. And you see that the bars for buses and for the cars are quite similar in their size, but the number of vehicles behind is obviously quite different. So we have about 100 buses in each direction on this stress section. In London, we have about 10 times as many cars on the same street section. The second example for an analysis that we did in more is for the stationary activities, and it is shown on the next slide. And this is an example from Malmö, from 2 out of the more reference streets here. And you see heat maps for the stationary activities. So the Malmö team has applied quite various tools and data for analyzing the current activities in the reference streets. And you see here 2 examples, and the darker the color here, the more people we observed in this specific street section. And on the lower part, you see a diagram, and you see that the temporal pattern of these stationary activities are quite different. Even though those 2 reference streets are really located next to each other, thanks to the destinations, to the type of use in the buildings next to the streets, also the stationary activities really differ substantially in their type and their times also. So you see here the blue ones, you have really a peak around lunchtime, whereas for the red ones here in the northern stretch, the northern reference street, we have the peak in the afternoon. So it seems that people come here to the southern street to have lunch, to stay outside, whereas in the upper street here, we have people more coming in the afternoon. So this is a short overview about current street users and patterns of street users in general, and then with the example of the 4 more stress sections that we have investigated in the MORE project. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Regina.